Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is season 5, episode number 3. We've already messed up our numbering. This was supposed to be episode 4 because it's week 4, but we missed Christmas season episode, so this is back to episode 3. Anyway, this is Tuesday, January the 2nd, 2018, and my name is Graham Perro. With me, as always, are Melissa Daphne and Tyler Fitch. Hope everybody listening had a great holiday. Happy New Year to everybody. And we've got a bunch to talk about, seeing as we didn't have a show last week, so we've got 2 weeks of games to discuss. A little bit of news to get to first. First of all, some sad news that we would be remiss if we didn't mention, and that is the death of Dave Huntley, who was a former coach and GM of the Philadelphia Wings a bunch of years ago. He was also the head coach of the Atlanta Blaze in Major League Lacrosse. He was a director of Team Canada. He's a member of both the Canadian and the U.S. Lacrosse Halls of Fame. He's a super popular guy from the sounds of things. There was, as soon as the news broke, pretty much, every player you can think of either said, I played for him and he was amazing, or I played against him and he was amazing, or I never played for or against him, but I knew him and he was amazing. So there was just no end of great comments from players and from other coaches. Just about every team in the league posted something as well. The Rock had a minute of silence or a moment of silence at the game last weekend. So just tributes all around from the entire lacrosse community. So some sad news. I don't know if either of you guys have ever met him or talked to him in your travels.
I haven't. But I was thinking, he's been out of the NLL for a little while, but he was active in the MLL and with the Team Canada programs, field programs especially. So it has a immediate impact to a lot of people, and it's rough that he's gone. But I never met him in all my time bumming around watching games.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had any contact with him. Philadelphia really hasn't come to Colorado that much, though. We are usually on the East Coast when it's been a travel. But it is nice, when you hear just somebody who had so much impact on the game. It's definitely going to be a hit to the league.
All right. Moving on to the only trade so far this year, or the regular season anyway. And it's kind of a big one. That was the Rock sending Stefan LeBlanc and a third-round pick in next year's draft to the Black Wolves. Defender guy Sheldon Burns, and a second-round pick in next year's draft. So this one was a bit of a surprise, and from the sounds of things, it was a surprise to the Rock players as well. So it wasn't one of these, at some point we're going to get rid of this guy, and that seemed to take a lot of the players by surprise. LeBlanc seemed to be pretty popular in the dressing room, so it certainly had nothing to do with that. I think my first thought was that's awfully weird, considering the firepower of the Rock offense and the fact that they weren't scoring. Defensive guy that was part of the team, had been part of the team for many years. Seems to be kind of not the way to do things, but maybe they decided that transition was more of an important problem that they had to solve. So in order to get a good transition player, they had to give up a good, and I guess maybe they figured with all that firepower, assuming it gels at some point, they could afford to give up one. And tough to lose Stefan LeBlanc, but I don't know an awful lot about Sheldon Burns, but I did watch him kind of a little more closely in the game this past weekend, and I like what I saw. Made a lot of good defensive moves, pretty speedy up the floor, even scored a goal. And the offense seemed to gel, and we'll get to that later, but it certainly wasn't an addition by subtraction. So a bit of a surprising move, but and it's only been a game for the Rock so far, but it seems to have worked out. Any thoughts on that, Tyler?
Yeah, my thought here is Is Stefan Blanc a Colin Doyle reincarnated, where he spends the first 7 years of his career with The Rock, and he'll get traded away for 3 years, and then he'll come back and win a championship or something like that. But it's not often you see a Toronto player, like Ontario-based player, get traded away from The Rock. Usually they get traded to The Rock. So that is the most surprising aspect to me. But there's something going on there. The team needed it. They scored 20 goals after they got rid of him. I'd say one game is not a sample size that proves a ton, but it appears to have worked in the very, very short term. What do you think, Melissa?
I was really surprised. I was trying to remember because I watched the game with him in this weekend, and I was like, wait a sec. I don't remember that trade. When did that happen? And it's definitely a surprise, but at the same time, he was a definite phenom when he came in on his rookie year. Nobody seemed to be able to stop him. But I can't recall him producing as much the past few years, and Graham, you could definitely correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I don't feel like he was at that same level. So maybe that was part of the trade, that he just wasn't performing like he started out. Definitely a good player. It'll be interesting to see how he does with a different team. That could definitely, as we've seen before, we've seen some great players change teams and they just go to less than mediocre, and other mediocre players that suddenly become phenomenal. So trades could definitely really change up that dynamic. So it'll be interesting to watch him this season. Back to you.
Yeah, I wrote an article about that on Islander this week about players who change teams and suddenly have outstanding seasons. They had the ones that, well, the first one that came to mind was Brett Hickey, who had like 6 points 1 year with the Stealth and then 83 the next year with the Rock. Now one was 18 games versus I think he played 3 games or 2 games or something with the Stealth, so it's not exactly a fair comparison. But he wasn't getting used much with the Stealth, and therefore he wasn't producing. Once he was a full-time guy with the Rock, then he exploded. There was a guy named Nick Trudeau who did the same thing a bunch of years before that. He had actually 0 points in 14 games with somebody, I can't remember who it is now. And then he was traded or moved to another team and 60 or 70 points or something to that effect. So we've seen some players that really produce once they change teams. There's some others which I didn't go into in the article that just drop off the face of the earth after they are traded. I don't know if that's the case with LeBlanc. He certainly had a great rookie season. He won Rookie of the Year. He and Garrett Billings were both rookies the same season, and they were neck and neck the whole season, basically. And LeBlanc ended up winning the Rookie of the Year over Billings. And then LeBlanc never really blossomed beyond that in terms of number of points, but that was kind of what Billings did, and he was the super point producer. LeBlanc was more of I want to say a setup guy. He wasn't really as much a Casey Byrnes kind of guy, like digging into the middle and just making space for everybody else, but it was more so that than the numbers. So I think he was more of a useful player to the team than his numbers might have indicated. I don't know if that's what the Black Wolves want from him. I mean, they have Sean Evans, they have Kevin Crowley, so they don't need somebody to come in and score 100 points for them. So if he can kind of do the setup stuff for Evans and Crowley, then that could be really good for that team. Okay, so we'll move on to the games, I guess, of the week of Christmas. What did we have? We had Rochester beating Buffalo 21-11. We had Saskatchewan beating New England 24-11. And we had Colorado beating Georgia 14-11. So everybody who lost scored 11 goals. And Colorado was the only team that won who didn't score 20 plus. So that was a bit surprising for me anyway. I kind of thought Rochester might beat Buffalo, but I wouldn't have been too surprised if it was the other way around. I did not expect them to spank Buffalo that badly. Similarly, Saskatchewan's had kind of a slow start in the last couple of years, but they seem to be just rocketing out of the gate this year. Scoring 24 against your former goalie is kind of adding insult to injury. Out of the Colorado win over Georgia.
I saw that coming.
I think we might have lost Melissa.
No, I'm here, but you're glitching, and
there she is.
so I'm just having long pauses.
Our packets are being inspected at the border.
So yeah, it just kind of locked up. So I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said to me.
Okay, I was just asking about the Colorado win over Georgia, and if you saw that game and what you thought.
That was definitely a surprise. I only saw bits and pieces of it, and since it's been a couple weeks and the holidays, I'll will admit my brain's a little mush, so I don't remember a whole lot. I remember that I felt like Georgia was dominating the game and Colorado kind of came from behind. But I was definitely surprised. I didn't expect that. It was just a weird weekend of games. I was very surprised by the scores and some of the play. And I think for some, maybe the holidays hit them too. Maybe this early start hit them too. Maybe some teams are just finding their groove very quickly. But as we've seen in the past, sometimes teams that start really strong don't finish strong. So it will be very interesting to see where some of these teams are on the back half of the season that are starting good. I'm definitely surprised at Colorado. I wasn't expecting a 3-0 start. That's wow. I can't remember the last time I was looking at this. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I was thinking when I look at the results from Christmas week standalone, it's like, oh, all the road teams lost, which I think they all had the distraction of traveling at Christmas. Like they need to be home getting ready for Christmas. Like, they're not so professional that their like life is on pause because the game's the most important thing. But then I think, well, the reality is everybody travels. So it's not like, oh, only the road teams had to go on the road and everybody else is home for Christmas. Like everybody had to go to the games and then go home for Christmas. But still, like I think the road teams liked it less that they were traveling the day before or 2 days before Christmas. So they all lost. And then the home teams are just like, great. Like, now we got our usual locker room. It sucks that we're traveling the weekend before, but at least it's our regular routine. And maybe that factored into the 3 home teams winning and the 3 road teams losing that weekend.
Oh God, I can't even imagine traveling that weekend in general for just family stuff, let alone to try and get your head in a game and be traveling for that. Looking back, I really just kind of wish they would have taken that weekend off and just had a bye week for everybody. And I mean, it threw us off because we weren't able to connect because of the holidays. So I can only imagine what it was like for some of these players. And, some of them have new families and things like that.
They have difficult enough schedules trying to get work involved or trying to get their work schedule to sync up with their lacrosse schedule. And we've all seen players who aren't able to play because of work. And I think Tyler may have a comment to that effect coming up. And so to add in Christmas and family stuff in there, it kind of made it a bit of a mess. And speaking of messy schedules, we'll get into Rochester as well. So yeah, there was a lot of messy stuff the past couple of weeks. So this past weekend, we had New England. Oh no, sorry, Vancouver was in New England, but New England won 13-9. Colorado beat Calgary. So as Melissa said, Colorado is now 3-0. Toronto pounded Buffalo 20-13, and Georgia got their first win of the season, 14-11 over Rochester. So we'll get into our awesome and not awesome. I guess we kind of started that a little bit. My first one, my first comment, I guess, is a bit of both. And if you haven't heard the story of the Nighthawks' journey to Georgia, here's what I know, and I don't know if this is completely accurate, but this is my understanding. They were supposed to fly into Georgia from Toronto on Friday. The flight was moved around. Like they shifted gates a couple of times, and the flight was delayed and eventually canceled. They were supposed to fly out the first thing Saturday morning. That one was canceled as well. Eventually, they chartered 2 separate planes from Toronto to Georgia. One of them landed an hour after the first, or the second one landed an hour after the first one, though they were both apparently direct flights, so I don't know exactly how that happens. They didn't actually arrive at the arena till after 8 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game. And Georgia obviously, pushed back the start of the game until 9 or even after 9. So finally, after basically 24 hours of sitting in the airport and traveling, they finally arrived at the arena less than half an hour before they had to hit the floor. And so my first awesome is kudos to the Nighthawks for actually showing up and playing a pretty decent game. I didn't watch the game, but I've seen bits of it. And despite the fact that the Swarm are 0-2, they're still the defending champs. And the Nighthawks put up a solid fight against them. So after that nightmare of travel, kudos to the Nighthawks for putting up a solid performance. Awesome is they had to start the game on a 2-minute. They didn't start the game on a power play. Georgia started the game on a power play because Rochester was given a 2-minute delay of game penalty. Come on, people. I mean, technically there's a rule, and I looked it up to see if that was actually a thing, and it was. Rule 92.7 is called late commencement of play. And I don't have the text of it here, but it basically said if one team causes the game to be, the beginning of the game to be late, then you get a 2-minute delay of game penalty. But that seems kind of cheap to me. I mean, it's not like they were in the dressing room saying, yeah, we'll be out in a second. We just want to talk strategy a little bit more, and delayed the game because of that. I mean, there was nothing they could possibly have done to avoid this. It was not something that gave them any kind of advantage or anything. So, I mean, giving them a penalty seemed to me like sticking to the letter of the law but ignoring the spirit of the law, which, I don't know, seems kind of backwards to me. So that was, in my opinion, not awesome at all. Tyler, do you got something?
Yeah, I'll stick with the awesome aspect of that delay. It's kind of in 2 parts, but I'll briefly say, what if the Nighthawks were not owned by like billionaire Kurt Stiles, and he could afford to charter 2 planes to get his team down to the game? Like, is the league reimbursing him? Like, is he just like, well, I want to play the game, so I can afford to do this, and then some owner couldn't? So that is a big question mark. It's awesome that he's a billionaire so that he could charter 2 planes a day of and get his team to the game. I'm not sure everybody's so lucky. The other aspect of the awesome that this created is the idea that there were staggered start times. So with all the delays that happened, that Rochester at Georgia game ended up starting like late in the 4th quarter of the who the hell played the other game? I'm already blanking, but the Toronto Buffalo game. So I got to watch pretty much all of Toronto Buffalo without having to pick between Toronto Buffalo and Rochester and Georgia. So that's something I always like the league to try to do. I mention it probably once a month or a couple times a season. That hey, if you have just 2 East Coast games, stagger them, and the fans win who want to watch all the games. And I won because of that. So that was awesome. Not really what they wanted, but it was still awesome. What do you have, Melissa?
I definitely want to kind of follow up on what Graham was saying with the delay of game penalty, because I've been at a couple games where that's come into play. I'm actually really shocked, as Graham said, it didn't make sense. I was actually at a game where the team literally took 10 or 12 minutes to get out of the locker room after halftime, and they didn't get a penalty. Okay, so if that didn't get a delay game, why would something like this, where it is completely out of their control, it makes no sense. It's just, of all the things to be like, no, this is what we're going to enforce, there just needs to be some consistency. I think it just kind of shows how it's, sometimes with the refs, let's flip a coin. Are we going to enforce that tonight or not? It's just kind of goofy. So that is definitely not awesome. I just can't. It's just crazy what they went through, and I'm sure with the cold spell coming up, we might see some more issues this week. But that is awesome that Rochester was able to get there and actually play. I mean, they didn't get shut out or anything like that. It sounds like they played pretty well. So kudos to them. That is definitely big awesome because I've flown and, had maybe a 3-4 hour flight, and I didn't even want to go into work when I worked in an office. So I can't imagine what it was like for them. Here, we're going to get off the plane, go straight to the arena, and you're going to play now. Traveling is exhausting, and I just can't imagine going through what they did. So way to go, guys. You definitely got my kudos. So back to you, Graham.
All right. I'd have to say that I wasn't watching the Georgia game as I was at the Toronto game, but I agree with Tyler in that by the time I got home from the Toronto Buffalo game, I was still able to watch the second half of Rochester, Georgia, which I wouldn't have been otherwise. So that kind of worked out. And I did see a tweet saying something about Rochester was starting the game with a delay of game penalty, and I thought, that's a pretty funny joke. And I looked it up, and it wasn't a joke. They were actually got this penalty, and I couldn't believe that they would actually go out of their way to give Rochester a further disadvantage after the crap that they had already gone through.
It seems like it's only ever called on the road team. Like if a home team is retiring somebody's number, and the session goes a little bit long because he wanted to give extra hugs and handshakes to people congratulating him, nobody gives them 2 minutes for that. Those things, there's a little bit of leeway, but 2 hours, it's a little bit much, I guess. I don't know.
All right, my next awesome, I'm going to go with the Colorado defense. Who knew that Dan Coates and Cam Holding were such terrible defenders that taking them out of the lineup actually made the Mammoth a better team? And of course, that's totally facetious, but more kudos to go around. More kudos to the Colorado defense. They added Scott Carnegie, so that certainly helped. But basically, the rest of the defenders have just stepped up. They said, "Okay, we've lost these 2 great defenders. We have 1 new guy that's coming in that still has to learn our system, but he's probably a 10-year vet of the league, so it's not going to take him that much time to learn a new system." But the rest of them have just stepped up their game, and the Mammoth are 3-0 and looking really good. They've beaten the Georgia Swarm, which is no mean feat. So kudos to Colorado for that, particularly their defenders. Tyler, you're next.
Well, this is making us really good at segues. My next one, awesome, is on the opposite side of the ball with the Mammoth, but same team there, is Ryan Benesh. And the way he has started off the season, he has an entirely new team, players he presumably hasn't played with a bunch at any point in his career. And after 3 games, he is leading the league in points. Not technically points per game because Mark Matthews is close enough and the Rush have only played 2 games. But the league leader in points right now is Ryan Benesh on his brand new team. So he is quickly adjusting to the system and the styles and the teammates that he has in Colorado. And it's off to a great start. So that's pretty impressive to see somebody do that with their being on a new team. I think Sean Evans had a hot start when he went over to New England, but you can't expect it. You got to think that there's some sort of change that's happening and can impact a player with such a transition. But he has hit the ground running. So kudos to Ryan Benesh on that. Melissa, do you have another awesome?
So my awesome pretty much ties into what you guys have already said. Mammoth 3-0. What? I'm just shocked at this. Part of that is because the Mammoth have definitely struggled the past few seasons. They made a whole lot of changes in the off season, which some I was excited about, some I'm not so sure about, some I was disappointed with. It really seems like this team is coming together very well. That could be because they have strong leadership in players like Benesh. Benesh is certainly rocking it. He did just fantastic this game. So I'm really excited for the rest of the season, which It's something I haven't been able to say very often the past few years. Usually I have that nut of dread, like, oh God, how bad are they actually going to be this season? But I actually have some excitement. And so, yeah, 3-0 is a nice place to see them being when they've definitely had some very choppy starts the past 6 or 7 years. So, yeah, that's my awesome because I'm still just kind of dumbstruck by it. What? Still trying to process this. They're 3-0. Are we sure? It's my team? Okay. So, what else you got, Graham?
All right. My next one is my team, and that I'm going to go with the Rock offense. In the first quarter of their game this past weekend against Buffalo, looked kind of like the previous couple of games where the offense just kind of wasn't getting it together. They didn't look terrible. They just didn't look great either. Got a bunch of transition goals, and that looked really good. I think Brody Merrill had one, Sheldon Burns had one, Challen Rogers had one, and this was all in the first quarter. And so that looked really good. But as I said in my game report, transition goals and secondary scoring are great and are necessary. But if the big guys aren't scoring, then we still have a problem. But in the second quarter, it looked like they started to really get things together. Adam Jones is looking really good. He's looking a lot more similar to his Colorado days than the Saskatchewan days from last year. He didn't really look like he fit in very well. Brett Hickey and Rob Hellier are starting to get it together. Hellier scored a really nice goal on Saturday night. Tom Schreiber just works so hard. He's always running. He's always working. He just looks like he's a bull in a china shop trying to just bash through people. And if he can't get through them, he'll get around them or jump over them or whatever needs to be done. And like I said off the top, I don't exactly want to say Stefan who, but they scored 20 goals without him this past weekend. And yeah, his presence, I guess, just wasn't necessary this past weekend. But yeah, it's great to see the Rock offense looking like what I expected the Rock offense to look like. I was kind of hoping it wouldn't take 3 games to do that. And again, it's only 1 game, so who knows what's going to happen in the next few. But if they look the rest of the season like they did this past weekend, then yeah, good things will happen. If you're a Rock fan, of course. It's not just generic good things will happen. But for me, good things will happen. Tyler, you're next.
I am all out of awesomes, so I'll pass to Melissa before we start rolling around not awesomes. You got anything else?
Well, I kind of have the counterbalance to one of my not awesomes. I would say New England and their fourth quarter play, because they definitely pulled it around and really looked well as a team. So some kudos there, but I think my not awesome is a little stronger. What about you, Graham? You have anything else?
I'm done with awesomes. So I guess we'll start with the not awesome for me is goaltending in Buffalo. And I guess Buffalo fans are probably a little nervous after the last couple of games. Alex Bouquet played great in their first game of the season against the Rock. And I'm sure all the Bandits fans were like, okay, we're good. We've Cosmo retired, so we were a little nervous. We got this guy who used to be a backup and is now a starter, and we'll see what he does, and he was great. And then game 2, he got pulled. Dave DeRuccio came in for all of 30 seconds, allowed a goal, and was pulled. He was also pulled because he was hurt and is now on injured reserve. And so Bouquet had to go back in. They really didn't have much of a choice, and he wasn't playing well, and they gave up 20 million goals. And then in game 3, he also got pulled. He looked pretty good in the first quarter, not so much after that. Zach Higgins came in, and he was all right. He didn't play badly, but the Rock offense, like I said, was getting things together, and so they scored a zillion goals. So the Bandits have given up 20 goals in consecutive games, and I could probably look it up and see when the last time they did that was, but it was probably many years ago. So I imagine there's some nervous Buffalo fans out there going, now what do we do? Was it just a couple of bad games for Bouquet, or is this what we were to expect going forward? And I think we all hope that that's not the case. Tyler, you're next.
I'm going to go back to a topic we touched on briefly because we're in not awesome section, but the travel woes that Rochester faced were a bummer to see in this day and age of the NLL. It's been a long time since I've personally seen it. It was 2007, 2006, but I think 2007. And the Arizona Sting and the Stealth did a home and home series. It was Saturday and then Sunday they played, or Saturday and Friday and Saturday, but I think it was Saturday and then Sunday. And basically the gear and the teams got separated between Arizona and San Jose. So like all the players were there and they had to wait for the next flight from that airline for the amount of weight that the gear created to arrive at like SFO and then get in a van and drive it down to the arena. It was crazy, but the start of the game was delayed at least an hour, but maybe even 2 hours. And they're like, all right, we're going to do post-game autographs right now. And they just opened the side gates and let every kid onto the field just right then, like totally uncontrolled chaos for the purpose of killing time. And it was quite the experience. And that's the last time I remember something like this. Generally, teams haven't had this level of breakdown in travel that I can remember. I think maybe it's happened once or twice, but not to the Stealth. So it was not awesome to see a team get stuck and not able to get where they needed to in a timely fashion. But they did get the game played, so that was nice that it ended up working out. But I imagine everybody was pretty nervous for a while there, especially on middle of Saturday when their flight had been canceled.
That's crazy.
So that was my not awesome. What do you have, Melissa?
Quick question, Tyler. Do you remember what year did the Stealth leave San Jose?
They left in 2009 is when they left there, but I left in 2007, and I know it was a game that I had driven to with and then 2008 and 2009 I was flying down to watch the game, so it wasn't those years. So I think it was 2007, but they left in 2009.
Yeah, I was trying to remember because just talking about all these travel problems, it just makes me remember a whole bunch of us Mammoth fans had gone to San Jose to cheer the Mammoth on in just one of those crucial games. And it was kind of a debacle for us because the game was supposed to be Saturday and then it got moved to Sunday and then it got postponed on Sunday and we had no idea what was going on. And then, of course, we had fans who they were worried they were going to miss their flight. You had players that were already booked that weren't sure if they were going to make their flight. And so it was just a whole lot of chaos, just kind of like what you're saying. And I remember it was around those same years. So crazy stuff. Still going with the Stealth for my not awesome. What in the world happened to them? That they were doing really well. It was back and forth with them in New England, but then Stealth took a command to the game, basically, in the third quarter. They looked really solid. They looked like they were going to run away with it. And then fourth quarter, it was like the team swapped jerseys, and all of a sudden, the Stealth were just gone. They were just playing really sloppy. It was lots of penalties. It was just crazy. It was such a 180 from the way they would play the previous quarter. It was just totally not awesome because I was really enjoying the first three quarters. And I definitely liked New England coming around. It was still what happened to this team. So that's my not awesome, is that they just suddenly hit the brakes on the fourth quarter. What about you, Greg?
But you're used to seeing teams play 3 out of 4 quarters, aren't you, Melissa?
No, I'm used to watching my team play 1 or 2 quarters. So
there was something like that. My next not awesome is, and we mentioned it earlier briefly, Aaron Bold's welcome back to Saskatchewan. He got a nice ovation from the fans and that sort of thing. But once the game started, it was probably more of a nightmare than anything. About 14 goals in 34 minutes and was pulled, and I don't believe he returned. And of course, they lost the game 24 to 11, as Evan Kirk only allowed 11. And given that these two guys were basically traded for one another in the offseason, and a number of people, I don't know, I want to say everybody, but certainly a number of people, myself included, thought, okay, well, here's a trade that Derek Keenan may not win, or it might be kind of a wash. And again, it's early days, but having this game in Saskatchewan and having Bold not play that well and Kirk play really well, Derek Keenan looks like a genius yet again. There aren't really all that many trades that he's made that we look at later and go, yeah, he kind of got fleeced on that one. It didn't work out for him or his team. He's just, I think they mentioned it on the Toronto Rock Total Access podcast earlier this week, that he's like the Barry Bonds of GMs, just hitting home runs all the time on every trade. So not awesome, fair and bold, pretty awesome for the Saskatchewan Rush and Evan Kirk. And that's it for me. Tyler, do you have any more?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the Stealth, and they are the only team in the league without a win. That's why I'm wearing my Rock jersey tonight, because at least they can win a game. It's a bummer. I had high hopes that the Stealth would continue what they started at the end of last year. But I think the reality is that Reese Stutch and his Achilles injury are much more significant than people talk about. Like he's better than he was, but he's still not as good as he ever was. And Logan Schuss not being able to travel to the New England game because of work commitments was shocking and quite a bummer. I did not expect that. They say that Doug Locker tweeted that they knew about it, so it wasn't a surprise to them. But still, the week before, he had 5 goals. Team loses by less than 5 goals. You think, well, you can make a difference. But we did get to see Cliff Smith play. And I always love a day that Cliff Smith plays a game. He's a fun guy. And I think that nobody's really talked about that I've seen, but the team's really missing Jordan Durston. Like, he would get to the middle. Nobody on the Stealth gets to the middle this year. He would do hustle plays, and he would get Corey Small open. Corey Small went from second or third in the league in scoring last year to, like, he's got 1 goal this year. I think maybe 2 now. He's off to a slow start, and they're not. I haven't heard anybody talk about it, but they are missing Jordan Durston, and the impact that the hole that he left when he was traded to Buffalo is significant and has not been filled. So Stealth can't win a game, no Schuss, and that was made for a bad weekend. But we should be done with that. We should have Schuss the rest of the season, and we'll get on the Schuss bus and score some goals and go win a game. Melissa, any other not awesomes?
So mine, and it's been my gripe for the past couple seasons. I don't know if it's the same way on live, but seriously, you still can't get the volume corrected on your stupid commercials that are about 10 decibels louder than the freaking games. I am so tired of having to rush to mute the TV because I don't want to have to put the volume down and then put the volume back up. But just seriously, it's not that hard in this technology-driven thing that we have going on here to stabilize your volume. Like, it's so loud in comparison. It's just really frustrating because it's not, it's just a little bit loud. No, it seriously is about 10 decibels louder. It is really obnoxious, and I really wish they would get that fixed. I don't know if it's the same with the live versions, but on the streaming, it is really bad. And so that is my definite not awesome. I'm going to whine about this some more, but it just makes it for such a poor user experience that I can't imagine how others, I can see some people just turning off the games because it's such a jarring experience. But that's my last not awesome. Did you have any more, Graham?
I do not. have to say that I don't think I've ever noticed a volume issue when watching games live. Maybe it's not. Maybe it doesn't happen live. Maybe it only happens on the replay. And I've watched a couple of games on replay, but mostly I watch them live, so I can't say I've ever noticed it. So maybe it's just a replay thing, but I know you've mentioned it a number of times, and Tyler's mentioned it a number of times, and I've seen it on Twitter a number of times. So it's not just you; it's certainly other people as well. And it does seem that I've been kind of, I don't want to say an apologist, but standing up for the NLL in a lot of cases where people will gripe about the streaming or NLL TV or whatever. And I remember specifically at the beginning of last season, there were there were problems with the first game, and there were all kinds of tweets from people saying, "This is ridiculous. We can't. We're paying for this, and we can't watch the game, and the sound's terrible, or the video's terrible, or whatever it is." And I'm like, people, it's 20 minutes into the season, and it's a brand new system, so give them some space, just relax. But it's now a full season into it, and as we've talked about on this show a number of times, this is not new technology. These are not new problems. YouTube has solved these problems 10 or 15 years ago. There are lots of other services out there that have solved these problems. And I'm starting to get to the point where I can't stick up for the league anymore because these really should have been solved a long time ago.
Well, and following up on that before we move on, Graham, that actually reminded me, because if you go on highlights, there is stuff from the championship game and then 2 games from week 4 as the highlights. It's like, if you're going to have that section, it should be updated. We're in week 4. Where are the other 4 weeks of games, essentially? Because 2 out of 4 games, where's the highlights? So I love that the NLL is moving forward in some things, and they're really trying to work on other stuff. But these little things, while it seems like it's just nitpicky fans, and maybe it is, those really impact the experience. So like the past couple weeks, it's crazy. It's holidays. You just got a lot going on. I couldn't watch all the games like I normally would. So it would have been great if I could watch 1 or 2 games and then watch the highlights for the other 2. But I couldn't do that because the highlights were only for the 2 games I watched. So it's like, oh, that didn't help any. But I really would like to see them update this. And I know Tyler might not want to talk about it anymore, but it sounds like the NLL wasn't updating the standings on the website either. So those little things really do matter. And when you let those little things go, those things add up to be a big thing, and you start losing a lot of fan experience. And so they really shouldn't undermine those things, because they really do impact the experience. And you're trying to bring in new people, and it's really hard. I used to use, I don't think I can access it anymore, but there was a specific clip that I had bookmarked for a long time that when I was talking to somebody about the games, I would show them this highlight reel because it was awesome. It showed just a whole lot of really good stuff to give them a feel for the game and to get them excited. And so they often would end up buying tickets and going and checking out Mammoth game. If there's nothing for me to link to, I can't do that anymore. So it's just those little things that really do add up. So I'll get off my little soapbox. Back to you, Graham.
So after saying that I didn't have a not awesome, I just gave you one. So I think that is really the end of my not awesomes. Tyler, do you have any more?
Yeah, I have one more. As I was getting ready for the start of the show, I was just double checking that we're still throwing people that lost. I haven't won a game yet. And so I went to the Stealth site, and across the top I see news. All right. Schedule. They show me a schedule. Stats, player stats, team stats, players, about the NLL, the NLL TV, and their shop in the search. And I was like, where are the standings? Like, I couldn't find the standings at all. Like, that seems like it's important. And it does exist. It's all the way off on the right. There's a little thing that will pull out over the page and do team standings. So they're so important that they're off to the side. But a free bit of user experience advice from me, NLL, is put it up the top. Like, it's the same caliber as the player stats and the teams and the schedule, but they're like, you hid the standings off where I couldn't even find it at first. So I was going to say, wow, like don't even track it, but it does exist. I was wrong, but it's not where I would have found it. And that is a bummer. So please fix that, and I'll put the link to the standings right up alongside either stats or schedule or something instead of off to the side by itself where it's not noticeable. Yeah, so that's my gripe of the week, I guess. Melissa, any other not awesomes from you? Because now myself and Graham are done.
Yeah, nope, I am off my soapbox.
All right, we will move on to our predictions from the previous week, previous couple of weeks, actually. The week 3 ones I have, the week 4 ones I had, and I lost. But in any case, I combined them all. So in the last 2 weeks, I was 5-2. I'm very happy with that. And Tyler and Melissa were both, thank you very much. Tyler and Melissa were both 4-3. And so overall, Melissa still has the lead at 8-5. I'm right behind at 7-6, and Tyler is right behind at 6-7. So all of us are round about the 500 mark, so not too bad. 3 games this coming week. Saskatchewan is in Georgia, Calgary is in Buffalo, and Toronto is in Vancouver. For leading the way, you get to go first.
All right, I always get the tough job. I guess it's a good thing. For Rush and Georgia, it's hard because we're still early enough in the season that you're relying a little bit on how they did last season, which, as we know, isn't necessarily relevant for the new season. But the Rush are starting off really strong, whereas Georgia seems like they're struggling a little bit. So I'm going to go with Rush, even though it is home field advantage for Georgia. And that is definitely a flight, so that could impact the Rush some. Calgary at Buffalo, I'm going to go with Buffalo. Calgary has not gelled yet. They definitely have some issues they're still working out from last season. So I just don't think they're going to be as strong. Buffalo is still a little bit of a wild card. We've seen some good, we've seen some bad. So I'm going to go with home field. With Toronto and Vancouver, I was originally going to go with Vancouver, but I had made that choice before this weekend's game, and especially before hearing Tyler, and so I flipped that, and we're going to go with Toronto. So I guess we'll just let Graham finish it off, and we'll go to Tyler next, even though he should be last.
I should be, right? Okay. Rush traveling down to Georgia. We'll see if it's a Georgia curse or not. If anybody did, it's make hard for anybody to get there, but I think they'll be okay. But I pick Rush to beat Georgia, as they still have, I think, some revenge on their minds from last June when Georgia came in and won the title in Saskatoon. That the Rush want to get them back for that. So I picked the Rush to win that game. Calgary at Buffalo. The Stealth are missing Jordan Durston a lot. I think Calgary is missing Jeff Shatler a lot. And I also just want Calgary to lose so that the Stealth don't fall that much further behind in the Western standings. So I'm going to pick Buffalo to win that game. If they can get some decent goalie play, then they can do wonders. And finally, Toronto at Vancouver. Vancouver hasn't shown me any reason that they would win a game. I think goalie play has been subpar. Brody McDonald ended up starting last week, so the concept that the Stealth have a number one goalie in Ty Belanger is completely blown out of the water at this point. And you don't know what they really have in that situation. And so I'll pick Toronto and their momentum from scoring 20 goals and winning last weekend. They'll come across country and give the Stealth an 0-4 start, which will be very unfortunate, but it looks like it could be a high likelihood of happening. Graham, what are your picks here?
All right. Saskatchewan and Georgia. I'm with you guys. I'm going for Saskatchewan. Georgia seemed to start to turn it around. They didn't play great in the first game, first couple of games, I guess. But they beat Rochester this past weekend. But yeah, they haven't quite looked like the same team as last year, whereas Saskatchewan looks like they were it looks like they really didn't like losing the championship. And I've heard that about a lot of successful teams is that they hate losing more than they love winning. And losing that championship did not sit well with them, and they plan on not having that happen again this year. And that's what they look like anyway, all this year. So I'm going Saskatchewan there. Calgary, Buffalo, this was a tough one because neither team is playing overly well. Buffalo played pretty good in their first game and not so much in the second couple. Calgary has not played very well this year either. And yeah, I didn't know who to pick on this one. I'm going to go for Calgary. I don't have a good reason why, just sort of a gut feeling, but I'm going to go for Calgary on this one. Toronto, Vancouver. Yeah, like you guys said, Toronto won big this past weekend. The Stealth have not looked good. We've seen in the past couple of years that the Stealth being at home isn't that much of an advantage to them. And it's interesting you mentioned, Tyler, that the Stealth don't have a number one goalie, because it's over the past couple of years, it seems that they keep telling us that they do, and then they don't. Because Eric Penny was going to be the guy, and then Tyler Richards ended up being the guy that year. And then the next year, Tyler Richards was going to be the guy, and Ty Belanger ended up being the guy. So this year, Ty Belanger was to be the guy. Now we don't know who the guy is. So assuming they have a guy by the end of the season, then we'll see what happens there. So I'm going to go for the Rock on that one. And I guess that will do it for the show. Yeah, I thought I had something else to talk about, but I didn't write it down, and now it's gone. So
I have one thing I want
whatever
to add
that
in,
was.
'cause I just remembered it.
right.
I guess the statistical oddity of the Stealth and Black Wolves game, where there was basically 4 scoring runs. The was it Black Wolves? No. Stealth scored first 2 goals. Black Wolves scored a few. Stealth then scored a few to take the lead, and then the Black Wolves went on a run to do it. And that was it. That was the only scoring. There was no really back and forth, except for the concept of they went back and forth. But goals by the Stealth, goals by Black Wolves, goals by Stealth, goal by Black Wolves, and that was it for the entire game. No, I can't remember anything like it. It really was surprising to me.
Yeah, I actually, I mean, I don't keep track of stats to that extent, but having written the Moneyballers for the last 5 years, I look at that kind of thing every week. And there's been a few games like that, but not to that extent. Like I've seen a couple of games where for the first 2 or 3 quarters, it's just runs, and then the last one is different or something to that effect. But I don't think I've ever seen one that had basically 4 streaks. And yeah, it was just 2, 6, 7, 7. So that was pretty odd. And both teams had 3 or 4 goal leads. So New England was leading by 4, and then Vancouver scored the next 7. And it looked like, and I didn't watch this game. I'm thinking of watching it now, actually. But as Melissa said, Vancouver looked like they just took over the game. And then New England scored 7 in a row. New England, who hadn't scored in 33 minutes, by the way, scored 7 goals in 9 minutes. So it's fun in lacrosse at that, how quickly things like that can turn around, because you can get goals that quickly. You don't see that in hockey as much, but in lacrosse you can go for 30 minutes without scoring and then score 3 goals in 45 seconds or something. So those are always fun, unless of course you're a Vancouver fan. That would be the Vancouver fan. All right, well, that will do it for another edition of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.